Okay. How are you, Clive?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Well, I've got a bit of lost my voice a bit. I've had a bit of a sore throat and a cold, but I'm going to whisper loudly, and other people are going to help throughout the next sort of 55 minutes.
You reassured us that you have some honey and lemon.
I've got some honey and lemon on the go. Yeah.
That is
I've
good.
got quite a lot of teaching this week, so it's not very good timing. But hopefully it'll stand up for at least the next 50 minutes.
Okay, well, we're definitely gonna help you. We're definitely gonna help you out, and we've got
Cool.
Carmen Ailey with us as well. She's here with me. We're in the committee rooms in the Camden centre of Camden, kind of thing. Yeah, how are you, Carmen?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. And Becca Dove as well is on the call from Camden as well. So that's always good to know. And Carmen, we were going to start with some reflections before Clive gets going on the research.
Yeah.
And this morning, actually, I was we were meeting with a prospective parent advocate that had come into the office to meet with us. And she still has a social worker at the moment on a child in need plan, which is ending soon. And the social worker had reached out to us and said that she was working with a parent that was very articulate, very interested in helping others and being part of the work of the Family Advisory Board that we have here in Camden. And so we met with her this morning, and that was really exciting. And she was talking about her experiences, and just to say broadly, without revealing any confidential information, but she was talking broadly about her experiences of domestic abuse and violence in relationships. And she talked about her emotional responses to that, but she'd also done some training and some education around domestic abuse and power and control, and she was interested in helping other people and helping other parents. So it felt really very apt this morning as we introduce this topic, and as we hear from Clive about the research that he's done on peer parental advocacy in Camden, that we were meeting somebody new and meeting somebody that really got it when we started to explain what advocacy was and what the work that we were doing. They really got it, and actually they got it before us, because they were coming with their idea of parental advocacy in their mind, and they were reaching out to find somewhere where they could utilise their experience in somewhere where they could make a difference. So it was a lesson for me in thinking that actually the people are there, the idea is there already, and it's not something that local authorities are designing on the hoof or are unpacking from a box. It's actually the people that are making this work, and I think in every local authority area there are people there that are keen to start this work. And I say that as I see Claire from Telford smiling at me on the call. Yeah, which is very nice. Yeah, and Carmen. So then, in actual fact, you had a meeting earlier this morning, didn't you? And so you were. Yeah, I met that parent. And then you were on your way in on the bus.
Yes, I got teaching ready.
Okay.
So when I was on the bus on my way to come here, and suddenly I got this thought coming into my head. I remember when I was little, my experience. So I had experienced different forms of abuse, and then I remember my mom coming to my mind that we both experienced a domestic violence at home. But I need to say that now we are in a very good place with my father. So we get it sorted. But thinking back before what happened, and I did not understand why my mom will stay in this situation, this relationship with my dad. And it is a long time abuse, most of our life, you know, basically. And it's up and down, and it happened all the time, and I could not understand. And when I was older, I was like in my 20s, and I asked my mom, why you allow this happen? Why you're not leaving my dad? Why you stay in this situation? And she told me, well, because from our culture and the resources as well, she tried to go to my grandma to tell her what happened. But my grandma tell her, you go home, that's your husband, you have to live with it. You marry this guy, then it's for life, and etc. So she has no friends to talk to. And because she married so young, and she had no skills or no confidence that to go out to build a life for herself. And she was stuck with young children, 2 young children with her, and everything is relying on my dad. So she just kept ticking on. And then I just thought, because when I was young, I just thought that is rubbish, that is ridiculous. I can just go outside, do whatever, and make a living for myself. Why can't you do that? So I'm still don't realize what is this, why is it like this. It bugging me for a long time. So until like 10 years ago, myself into the same situation. And then when I thought back, and instantly I understood, I realized what she was going through, you know. And when I thinking of what I'm doing now as the parent advocate, to go out to help other parents who have been through the similar situation. I think if I have an advocate who have the same situation, going through the same thing as me, I will be super grateful, because I'm not looking for this person to remove the situation from me, but this person is totally understand what I'm going through internally, you know. I'm glad someone will understood, even though they just sit there and listen to what I'm saying. I will be super grateful. So when I'm now doing this, and as a parent advocate, I am so grateful for this, and I can help the parents I work with have this comfort they could find from me. We share this feeling, you know. Yeah, it's just great. I think we need more parent advocates to help people to kind of like counseling, that kind of thing, to help them to be able to share their emotion, their feelings with others while they're going through this crisis, these difficulties. Yes.
And what was the start of the journey for you in the advocacy in Camden, do you think?
So the journey, it started in 2014 when I met you. That's like the savior.
Don't call me that. Don't call me that.
So the formation of the Family Advisory Board in Camden. So from all the years we've been sharing and learning the process, in which is lead to the Camden Conversation. This research project was done by Anagata from Royal Holloway and Annie, Surviving Safeguarding, and the Family Advisory Board members. So there were 11 recommendations from the research. So it's the first things, and the most important thing, it was develop the independent advocacy. And other things is like review of the language use, family group conference to be offered, explore community venues and more flexible timing, and the role of the peer advocacy. Child protection chair to meet family beforehand and between conference and encourage families' input. and multi-agency professional to join the meeting, enable understand the child protections process, identify creative and digital way to allow feedbacks and debrief, multidiscipline Camden conversation training on empowering families, an opportunity for the multi-agency professional to critically reflecting on the child protection system and review, support, and offer to birth parents. So the main issue is the main finding is the importance of independent parent peer advocacy, and then we continue to work with the manager of the child protection chair, a conference chair, and to develop this role within Camden. And later we start to get the opportunity to observe the child protection conference. So we go in to observe, to learn, and to experience and get used to the process, the environment, to get more confidence. Basically, we need more confidence into doing this job. Before we provide this service. I have started to get referral from July, and I think I'm learning, keep learning while I'm doing, because every case is every parent's story is different. Yeah, so we just keep learning and not practicing, working with parents, you know. And then yes, I'm still working with the parents, and there was some challenge, but there are also some positive feedback coming from them, from the parents. Yeah, I'm seeing them having this gradually having this positive change in their life, in their situations, and it takes lots of time and patience, and I'm knowing them that this will help them. They will have a hope seeing this, and they will have a better future for them, and that makes me very happy while I'm doing this work. So I'm also so pleased to see this fruit from all the work we have done in the past 9 years, you know. I'm so also grateful to meet Clive now this year, yes, and knowing this person, and put a lot of time and energies into the research and in helping the others to learn and understand more about peer parent advocacy. Thank you, Clive.
Clive, did you want to pick up the story? And when did you first get interested in? I'm poised to operate the slides, but I was curious about when you first got interested in the concept of peer advocacy.
Yeah, it's a good. Sorry, I've lost my voice a bit. I've got a bit of a sore throat, but hopefully, yeah, I'll be able to speak for the next 40 minutes or so a bit. That's a good question. I think someone put me onto David Tobis's book around parental advocacy in the States a couple of years ago. I think it might have been an academic at Cardiff, Jonathan Scowfield, I think. But before that, you know, like 10 years ago, I used to chair child protection conferences, and sometimes parents would bring along a friend or a family member to help advocate for them. And yeah, that really seemed to often help them have a voice, I think, and helped the process a bit, because it's such a difficult meeting. You know, I remember thinking back then, more than 10 years ago, maybe 12, 13 years ago, 2010, I guess it was 2009, how this meeting just didn't seem the best way of getting parents and professionals together to try and work out a plan to keep children at home, keep them safe, keep people working together. It seemed very adversarial. I mean, I always used to think, I didn't really see the point of case conferences. Obviously, I can understand them in terms of multi-agency working and anxiety and sharing anxiety. Maybe it's helpful in that regard, but actually in terms of having good relationships between parents and families and professionals, I'm not sure it's great. And I've since done quite a few studies on this that sort of shown that, I think, and as have many other academics. So yeah, that's what I'd say on that. We can't get rid of child protection conferences yet. Personally, if I were the education secretary, I would. But at the moment, we've got them, and we've got to do our best with what we've got. And of course, some authorities are looking at innovative ways of having like family group conferences instead of child protection conferences. That sounds like a positive move, but even in that situation, I think there's still space for a parent advocacy, a peer parental advocate to help with the situation.
We've got Becca there saying you should vote for you, Clive. There's some blue skies thinking. Yeah, oh, that's great to hear. And we've got it's noted on the slide here that you've been working with a colleague, Clive, haven't you, on this?
Yeah, so Sammy Fitzsimons is a researcher at Cardiff University in Cascade. She's done a lot of work on this project, as has Lily Evans, who's a PhD researcher at Cardiff University. Rich has also been involved in helping with this work. And of course, we've worked very closely with Camden, which has been really good. Yeah.
Can you see the slides there, Clive?
Yeah, I mean, you might want to go to slideshow and say full show, because you that might be a good way of presenting it. Yeah, from beginning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I guess what I'd say is we've been doing this work with Camden. We were lucky; we got some funding from the What Work Centre for Children's Social Care back in the summer of 2021. So just over a year ago. We approached Tim before putting in the bid, and Tim was up for doing an evaluation. We've also done a bit of work with Southwark, and we're also in conversation with Swindon and other local authorities about doing a larger study. We're also doing some research in Wales around parental advocacy. But I think what we're going to be focusing on today is Camden. But I'll just say a bit about some background. If we go on to the next slide, Tim. Mine's a little bit, looks maybe frozen. It just said parent advocacy in context.
Oh, can anyone else see there? You're not seeing the other slides?
No. Mine's the same. I was just moved on to interviews with 52 parents.
Yeah. So I'll just spend a couple of minutes highlighting this research we did, which was in 2 local authorities. This is going back sort of 5 or 6 years. Excuse me. And we wanted to do some research into parents and children's views of child protection conferences. There have been some studies on this, but we wanted to sort of update it. Yeah, if you press on from current slide, that should be better. And we're interested in understanding parents and children's experience of social workers and child protection conferences in particular. What I'm going to focus on in this little bit is parents' views, because that's most relevant to today's session. If we go to the next slide.
Has that moved on, Clive?
No, not quite yet, I don't think. Yeah, so we interviewed 52 parents and 40 children. If we go on to the next one.
Sorry, there's a big lag at our end because I am
okay.
On that.
No worries, no worries. I can actually look at it on my slides. Actually, it might help. Yeah. So basically, what we found in this study, with the 52 parents, which is a pretty decent sample, particularly considering their children were on a child protection plan at the time. Parents were generally pretty negative about their experiences of child protection conferences and social workers. They often found that the report was shared, that the report from the social worker was shared on the day or a day before the conference. It would often have quite a lot of inaccuracies in the report. it would have a lot of personal information about their lives, and often they might feel some degree of shame or embarrassment. You know, I remember a parent talking about in every report for every conference and core group, even though this incident happened 20 years ago, it would mention that she'd been sexually assaulted 15 years previously. And she thought rightly, I think, why is it necessary to have this? What relevance does it have today? And even if it is relevant, why does it have to be in every single report? Leading to this parent reliving this sort of trauma every time she had a meeting with social services. Often the reports from other agencies, schools, health were shared literally at the meeting. So no chance for parents to outline any inaccuracies or disagreements really with the reports. If we go on to the next slide. Lack of communication was a big issue. Excuse me. A lot of the parents felt that social workers didn't really listen to them, didn't hear their viewpoints. You know, one said that I had 6 social workers, but only one really listened. And like we hear in a lot of local authorities now, that the change of social workers was a big issue. A lot of young people and parents talking about 5 or 6 social workers in a year, which obviously it doesn't work. Yeah, if we go to the next one. What would parents like to change about the child protection process? Well, and this was before parent advocacy was really happening, of course. One of the big things they'd like to change is more influence over the child protection process. I'd like to have more of a say of who attends and who does not. And in one of these 2 local authorities, they used to have invited to every conference, and often they'd attend. It was the local sort of children's centre who would support all the families, all the vulnerable families in that area. And people would come from the children's centre, even if they were unlikely ever to work with the family. You know, so I mean, they'd have to have children of that age, but it wouldn't be that you'd have a worker allocated, and those people would often live in the community alongside the parents, and parents understandably found this very difficult. They said, why are these people coming to this meeting, hearing very intimate details about my life, when they're not even going to work with me? And it was like they were invited just in case they might work with them, which just seems bizarre to me. But yeah, the more I read and do research and experience child protection conferences, the more they just don't make sense to me. It just seems a bizarre thing. They'd like reports to use simpler language and professionals to use simpler language. And they found, like I've touched upon already, the reports were invasive, disproportionate, and did not recognize strengths. And they definitely like the reports much more upfront, so they could really read them and take in what they said. Okay, so I think we're going to pass to Rich for the next couple of slides. Is that right, Rich?
Clive,
yeah, bro. Thanks for that, Clive. So we'll just briefly do a whistle-stop tour of parental advocacy and what it is and some of the research behind it. Basically, one of the best explanations is by a report by David Tobis and Bilson and their colleague. And they describe parental advocacy as a peer advocacy where parents who themselves have had experience of the child welfare system help other parents involved to navigate it. And they might also develop strategies to change the system. And they identified 3 types of peer advocacy. And these kind of different types are slightly arbitrary because they kind of bleed into one another, but they're useful distinctions to make. The first one is case advocacy, and that's where a parent advocate works, I suppose, one-on-one, offering support and guidance and information to help a parent currently involved in the child protection services. And that's what Carmen does, and that's what Clive's research in Camden has been looking at. The other type of advocacy is programme advocacy, where parents are involved in the designing, shaping and delivering of programmes designed to help parents care for their children. And then the final one is policy advocacy, which is where parents who have been involved in the child protection system act politically to instigate change by participating on government boards and attending conferences. And there's a few examples of that. So why do we think parental advocacy is a good idea? Here's just some of the a few of our kind of favourite quotes, I suppose. One of my favourites is the one in the middle at the bottom by David Tobis, which is involving parents is not solely a matter of justice or sympathy or a desire to be nice to parents, which is an ideological point of view that we can argue about, but it's a critically important thing to do to help kids. So not only is this a kind of ethical and moral position to come from in terms of involving parents and collaborating with them and levelling the playing field, but also is a critically important thing in order to help children remain and live safely in their families. Another good one there is the one by Bridget Featherstone and her colleagues in a book called Protecting Children, and they talk about parents having built up an unparalleled knowledge of the range of welfare systems and services, and that the skills and knowledge held by families can be utilised through a process of co-production to arrive at transformative approaches. And then one of the key issues around parental advocacy, or I suppose one of the key issues in social workers and in child protection and the work with parents, is the issue around engagement and partnership. And when you look at the research, engagement and partnership with parents is recognised as a crucial component of social work in terms of it being an effective way of helping families. Certainly, non-engagement and poor engagement is detrimental to outcomes and can be a predictor of escalating involvement from children's services. So Lauren Devine, who's not related to me, but she argues that her research has found that when parents refuse or decline to engage with services, that increases the probability that social care will escalate their involvement, irrespective of whether there's been an increase in risk or not. And then there is a consensus among social workers that parental engagement and partnership working is valuable. So if you ask social workers, they'll often say parental engagement is important to them. But despite that, it's proved extremely difficult for us to translate the principles of partnership-based practice into our direct work with children and families. And there's a really good quote by Lady Hell that I'll just read out, which is, "The aspiration of developing a partnership between children's services and families with children in need proved very difficult to achieve. The trouble is that if efforts to work with the families run into difficulties, the local authority can always resort to care proceedings, and the families know that." And so there is something about, irrespective of how skilled or compassionate and helpful you are as a social worker, if you are then having to go around and visit a family and say that we're so worried that we're placing your child on a child protection plan, or that we're entering pre-proceedings, that's going to immediately create a level of distrust and undermine the ability to have a collaborative relationship. And so there's some built-in limitations, I think, to the degree to which social workers can build relationships. Plus, there's loads of systemic factors that undermine it. And so parental advocacy is a way to resolve what has otherwise been quite a long-standing problem around participation and collaboration with parents. And that's been a long-standing problem even with the implementation of various different frameworks, for example, signs of safety, systemic practice, restorative approaches and motivational interviewing. It still remained a kind of a difficult issue. So we need to develop a repertoire of strategies for involving participation instead of just simply relying on individual social workers to change their practice. This is just a quote from a social worker who reflects their desire to work in partnership with parents. The research into parental advocacy, there's 3 themes which I'll only very briefly touch on because they also get they're also reflected in the Camden report, which Clive can speak to. But the 3 key themes that we identified in the research in terms of some of the benefits to parental advocacy are that parent advocates there's a shared experience. So parents will often talk about an appreciation and gratitude towards receiving help from somebody that's been through similar experiences, but also just from the same background and sometimes within the same community. The second element was around the communication in terms of just being more accessible and available than the social worker might, but also in terms of being able to translate some of the language and the concepts which often parents find confusing, or there's lots of jargon and technical words that make it difficult for parents to understand what's happening for them. And also that parent advocates can advocate when a parent doesn't fully understand, because often if you're under immense pressure and stress and you don't understand, you become frustrated, and when you become frustrated, you often become angry, and that then undermines the relationship between a parent and a social worker. And often underlying the anger is a level of fear and anxiety, but that can sometimes get missed in the heat of the moment. And so advocates can kind of function as a bridge between the parent and the social worker. And then the final element is around the support, and the support is an emotional element of it, and the other, but also parents who've been through the child protection system often have a really good knowledge of the available services and can speak from experience about what helped and what didn't help. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was that parents were much more likely to hear advice and feedback from a parent who'd lived and been through that experience than they were through a social worker, even if it was similar advice. Parents were much more able to receive and then act upon the advice from an advocate. And then the next slides are around supervision. I won't go into this other than to say there's certain conditions that we need to create within local authorities in order to maximise the probability that parental advocacy will be successful, and supervision was a key element of that. In the same way that any member of staff would need support in order to do their job effectively, especially within this work where it's so emotive, and we're working with people who've experienced trauma and etc., etc. And then the final slide is around the acknowledging the relationship between the parent and the advocate. And so just one note of caution is, just because a parent advocate has been through a similar experience doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to instantly be able to form a meaningful relationship. And so there still needs to be consideration towards making sure that the parent and the advocate are a good fit for one another. And so that's a whistle-stop tour of the research that we've done with Clive and I and some others. So I'll hand it back to Clive now to look through the Camden work.
Thanks, Rich. That's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, and that's a paper we've done, a narrative review, which hopefully will be coming out in a couple of months. We're just waiting on peer review for it that Rich led. So when that comes out, we'll be able to share it with people. So yeah, if we go on to the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about for the next sort of 15 minutes or so, but I'm hoping Tim and Carmen and others will help a little bit, because there's some quotes there that'd be useful to give my voice a bit of a break, apart from anything else to pick up on. So yeah, like I said, we started this study in August 2021, finished in August 2022. We were funded by the What Works Centre, and we've got a paper again, hopefully coming out in a couple of months on this in the Journal of Children and Family Social Work. We're waiting on the peer review. But if we go on to the next, and the report's coming out on the What Works website in January, so get in touch if you'd like a copy of that when it comes out. Yeah, so it was what we call a realist study, and I'll say a bit more about that shortly. But basically, we wanted to know about what were the key ingredients, what was going on with the peer parental advocacy service in Camden. Like Rich said, it's sort of one of the leading peer parental advocacy services in the UK. So it's hopefully some really good learning can come from it, and I think it has, that can help other services develop peer parental advocacy. What are parents and professionals' experience of parental advocacy, and what potential impacts, both positive and negatives, do parents and professionals who work with peer advocates identify? So if we go to the next slide. So yeah, we did what's called a realist study. With a realist study, there's slightly different ways of doing it, but effectively you develop what we call an initial program theory or a logic model, generally an initial program theory, and then you test it. So there's 2 stages to the research study. Generally, there can be 3, but you do interviews, you do observations, you do focus groups with all the key people, and then you develop some theories. You also include other research that's been carried out, so the narrative review that Richard was talking about, and you develop some theories about how something might be working, and then you spend a number of months testing that theory, and it's a way that's fairly robust of working out how an intervention is working, whether it's particularly benefiting certain people, whether there's certain people that that it's less useful for. But yeah, so if we go on to the next slide. Yeah, so we did quite a lot of field work. We carried out interviews, a number of interviews with social workers, with parents, with advocates, with senior managers. We did focus groups, we did observations at child protection conferences, and then we had sort of stakeholder meetings to feedback our initial program theory and test that out with people in Camden. If we go to the next one. And basically, we identified sort of 3 main themes through this report. Basically, all the participants had a positive view of parental advocacy and felt it was having a positive impact on parents and their involvement in child protection. Parental advocacy seemed to particularly improve social workers and parents' relationship and help them to build trust and rebalance the power. So that was really positive. And it seemed to ensure, as far as possible, that parents are more involved in decision making when child protection authorities are involved. So, you know, very positive themes. We've got some quotes to back up these themes. I don't know whether, if we go to the next slide, Tim, I don't know whether you and Carmen might want to read out a few of these slides just to give my voice a moment of break.
Yeah, and actually, we've got some interesting contributors on the call as well. I don't know, I've just noticed there's a few people I just noticed on the call, Andrew and Louise, but Sue Felipe, are you able to unmute Sue? Because Sue Felipe is now working on innovation projects in other local authorities, always doing interesting work around culture change in child protection settings. And Sue was a senior manager for a long time in Camden and sort of saw the change, has seen the change in the social work culture over time that has allowed this positive view of parent advocacy to develop. Are you there, still there? So after that big build up, I'm wondering if Sue.
I'm still here, Tim.
Oh,
yeah, I'm very. Yeah.
There's a familiar voice. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Hello to everybody. I'm just listening very carefully, Tim, because I think there's messages that I need to hear again, and I think there's some new messages that are really impactful, really, and it's really important when you go to other places, when you see other families, that there's other ways to do things. So I think that's my learning today. So I'm really trying to listen more than anything else.
Yeah. Do you see it in your experience in social care? Do you see a move towards working more collaboratively with families? I mean, that's always been your ethos, hasn't it? Are you seeing a change in culture generally?
I think so. I think though, some of the things that initially happened in Camden, Tim, I think people get worried about the word parental advocate. It gives somebody, that's my role, I'm a so-and-so, or that's my role, I'm a social worker, or whatever. So I think there's lots of hesitancy. And that slide then about why this works, it actually works for the children and makes people more involved in decisions about their children, is the message that we should be giving to people, I think. It's about confidence, I don't think it's about people not wishing to do it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Good to see you, Sue.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, you take care. And I think we've got Kevin on the call as well. Are you there, Kevin? Kevin been involved with the Family Advisory Board for a long time and took part in the advocacy training as well. Are you there, Kevin?
Yes, I'm around. I'm just in the kitchen.
Oh.
But
what's your take on parent advocacy, Kevin? Do you think it's an important thing?
Yes, I think for me, I think it's really important. And just because, you know, I was a teenage parent, and when I look back there, even when, you know, there wasn't much advocacy around in terms of having a voice. And we know that, you know, lots of teenage parents get involved with social services for various reasons. And I see this opportunity as an opportunity to, you know, to actually give people a voices in the room, especially during child protections, way before things get too complicated. Because in my experience, I felt like my voice were only heard when it was really heated, and at that time it was quite difficult to think through everything. So I think hearing, you know, the finding from Clive and Richard and everyone involved is brilliant. You know, it's really, really good. And I think there's still a lot of learning to go through, I think. And I think this work, you know, should be treaded gently. It should go quite gently, because, you know, these are people's experiences that you're going through. And yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing the journey as we go along.
Listen, thank you, Kevin. It's a nice one for us because you're trained and ready, aren't you? And you're involved in so many things, fingers in so many pies. But we know we're going to snag you at some point to start doing some parental advocacy work proper in Camden with us. And it's good that you're able, and you always contribute to us in different ways. So we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And and we are coming back to the slide the slide, Clive. I know that Becca, you had some reflections on perhaps directly on the slides there. How are you, Becca?
Yeah, good, thanks, Tim. I think one of the, and I'm looking at Claire from Telford, who I've learned so much from over the past little while, and Claire talks a lot about the experience in the Sun world, and I've listened real deep to everything that she said over the time that I've known her. And I'm sitting with that thought that it's a lovely quote from Taiwo Afakwe that kind of really resonates with what Claire and Carmen and Kevin have said, is that no one can give power to another person, but they can stop taking power away so that their own power is able to breathe. And that feels like such a fundamental principle of what people like Claire and Carmen and Kevin and so many others are trying to bring to the child protection space, that power is able to breathe. And I suppose another important reflection, that having a parent peer supporter does not in any way absolve practitioners like me in the early help space, or you, Tim, in the social work world, from being accountable for our own practice and whether our practice reflects our values. We're never absolved of that responsibility that we carry. But what I see Carmen doing is really accompanying someone on the journey so that they can see the road ahead, to help make sure that people's rights are known and understood and championed, because whatever the journey, whatever the circumstances, children's rights, human rights and legal rights matter. And then to help the journey feel less at risk of becoming conflict saturated, so that wherever the journey leads and whatever the journey's ends, that no one who took that journey feels like it broke them. And to acknowledge that everyone who loves and cares about a child and their family members is welcome here. And there's something about just kind of holding on to the principles, because some of that stuff from a research perspective is almost impossible to quantify or bring together. But in the time that I've spent and been honoured to spend with people that are working in the peer advocacy space and working in the parental support space, I think those are the things that I've seen that they bring to a journey that we take together. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks very much, Becca. Much appreciated. And we've taken that in a few directions, Clive. Shall I move the slides on to? We've got some nice. This is. Do you recognise this one, Carmen? Some of these I can almost.
Do you want to read some of those quotes?
Yeah. Which was your one? You read your own quote, Carmen. This one here, was it?
Inspirational.
Oh, sorry. This one, yeah. I'll read that one then, yeah.
So we can be more inspirational, you know, because as we've been through this storm, we've been through this, and you can encourage them, give them more power to build their resistance, to be maybe change their attitude into not defensive but cooperative with the social worker.
And I think I really learned through the process of Clive coming to do this research, and Clive and Sammy and some other colleagues from CASCADE came, and I mean, they gave presentations to the whole service. They conducted focus groups, didn't they? So actually in this room we're in now, we had a focus group with about 25 people that had received parent advocacy and peer advocates in this room. So, and hearing those messages, but particularly I was really surprised by, Clive mentioned at the start, the universal positivity towards the concept, and the fact that you know, the social workers, senior managers that Clive and others spoke to were positive and could see the value in it, and were saying the things that were reflected in the research, the wider research, that actually advocacy can be a bridge and has a practical application in getting things done and keeping children safe. So it was really useful for me to give me peace of mind that people in the service were really understanding what it was about and what the aims of it were. Yeah. And this is a nice one about working with people from different cultures, being that bridge to understanding. Yeah. We've got yeah. You know, with this, we've got Andrew Rist on the call, and he's the newest member of the team. And me and Rich met with him. We said we want to improve the quality of these webinars and the technology. And I think I've been proving, I think I've been unconsciously showing how you badly manage this technology on a webinar on this call. I can't. I'm actually trying to you know, do the full screen the slide, and it's not working.
Excuse me, if we go on to the next slide, Tim, it's a bit clearer maybe. Yeah. This is I mean, it's not a great slide at all because it's got so much going on there. But I'll just go through some of this. So when we do, sorry, you're probably not able to see that. Fortunately, I've got another copy, but we can send out these slides and you'll be able to see it, hopefully. When we do these realist evaluations of parent advocacy programs or different programs, what we're trying to do is work out what the context is, what the intervention is, what are the mechanisms that make that potentially help advocates make a difference, and then what's the outcome. And I'll just go through some of these points a little bit. So the context, it says there at the top there, in the unlikely event that you could read it, it says the system feels oppressive and intimidating. Now, Camden done some great work, but still the notion of which has to be done. You know, it's done in all Western countries, rightly. There has to be a group of professionals in our country, social workers, who, when there's serious concerns about children, you know, which happens, of course it does, they go and they visit the family, they do an assessment, they work out what's going on for a family and how hopefully to keep the children safe and keep the children at home and put in some support. But the nature of that system in this country, and I think pretty much all countries, is quite oppressive, or people find it, parents in particular, family members, find it oppressive and intimidating because the subject matter is so emotive, isn't it? Imagine someone saying that you're not able to look after your children. You know, there's nothing more personal, really, than saying you're not doing a good job looking after your kids. So, by definition, it's a very difficult process. But there are certain things in the UK child protection system that make it worse and more difficult. The language is very complex, which can make child protection meetings and the whole landscape very, very difficult, very inaccessible. Parents are under a great deal of pressure. Social workers often under a great deal of pressure, very high cases, not necessarily so much in Camden, but in a lot of authorities. And there's this fear that pretty much all parents have when they get a social worker, the social workers are going to try and take their children away. So these are real fears, real experiences that people have, which multiple studies have shown. Well, what can the advocate do about that? Well, one of the things they can do, I think, is help bring the temperature down. I'm doing some psychotherapy training to be a psychotherapist. We talk a lot in that about projecting and how people project onto others. In my work, the client or the patient onto the therapist, and vice versa, the countertransference. And in child protection meetings, there's a lot, and in home visits, and throughout the whole process, there's a lot of people transferring their emotions onto others. You get the overwhelmed social worker, you get the overwhelmed parent, you get the child who's really struggling. Everyone's projecting these very difficult feelings onto each other, which is adding to the tension, the emotion. But what a peer parent advocate can hopefully help do, and I think we did see clear evidence of this in Camden, is bring down the temperature. You know, Jordell, who does some great work there in Camden, Carmen have talked about this, bringing down the temperature and helping people, understand each other, communicate with each other, be a bridge there between the professional and the advocate. And I think this is where, there's different models of peer advocacy. In Wales there, they've got some, what we, for want of a better word, we call professional advocacy. Which also is very helpful, but I particularly like the peer parental advocacy because it means that you've got someone there with you who's been through the process, who's been through the child protection process, has come through the other side, and that can help you see that there's a way through. They understand, they have a very good understanding of what you're going through. It's not just another professional in the room. There's already enough professionals in those conferences, believe you me. I've chaired conferences of 20 people. It's intimidating. It's very difficult. So I think, they can lessen the transference of very difficult emotions, lessen the projection, allow parents and social workers to talk to better, using clearer language, really think about the issues, hopefully have more honest relationships. And hopefully we then look at the mechanisms there, rebalance the power relationships between parents and professionals, improve the understanding of the language, and help reduce some of the difficult feelings. And ultimately, the outcomes we're looking for is parents have increased power. It's normalizing community support and building networks. It can become very us and them, the child protection arena. I think peer parent advocates can help that us and them issue and reduce the risk of that happening. I'm aware we've only got a couple of minutes left here, but I just wanted to, I think this is the sort of nub of the issue, really. There's other slides, there's always other slides, but this to me is key, really. And I don't know whether we've got any questions, any comments in the chat box. If anyone wants to say anything. We're going to do another session, aren't we, Tim, looking at this in maybe January, February, and maybe offer to local authorities and parents maybe a longer session, 2 or 3 hour session, where we can really get into more detail about the advantages, but the challenges also of implementing this, which is a new way of working. Definitely peer parental advocacy is a new way of working.
That's right. And I think, Rich, we have got a schedule with Andrew in harness on improving the quality of the technology delivery. We're going to be have a schedule of webinars next year. But I wanted to say, I mean, Clive, I think as that insight, I think other people will agree with me. But just you talking about your psychotherapy training and that insight about projection, I think just really shows that you're coming with a real, nifty, robust skills on the research, but you're also bringing that wisdom and that emotional literacy to the research as well. And I think that is a bit like a parent advocate, really. It's that those skills across the piece, aren't they, that are needed to connect and really be an explainer for people. So thanks so much for bringing your sage voice on this topic to the webinar. Really appreciate it. Don't you think, Rich? That was brilliant, wasn't it?
Oh, it's ace. Yeah, just really, like, the research is can be incredibly complex, but Clive, you just presented that really clearly and plainly and without any unnecessary jargon or complexity. So thank you for that.
And you're a big part of that research as well, Rich. And do you want to say something about, we're going to finish up now. Did you want to say a word about next year and the upcoming webinars?
Yeah, I'll say two things. One is definitely check out a website called Relational Activism. There's loads of resources and materials and previous webinars that we've done that is available on that site, and we'd really be grateful if you found it useful to share those resources with your colleagues, and so that we can begin to build some momentum around some of these principles and ideas. And then yeah, just keep your eyes out for a series of webinars and that we're going to be convening next year.
Yeah, it's really nice. We know there's friends on the call and there's a community around this work. So yeah, let's keep it going and learning together and stay in touch. And we'll finish up the call now, but we're really grateful to everybody and all the contributions. Thank you so much, and see you next year. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Still recording, Tim.
Oh my, oh my God. I don't know. Actually, this is